The envelope landed on the mahogany table with a soft thud that somehow echoed through the room like a gunshot. Pristine white paper, embossed with the gold-leafed insignia of Richardson, Blackwell and Associates, one of Boston's most prestigious law firms. It's standard procedure. "Eliza," said Margaret Thorne, my soon-to-be mother-in-law. Her voice was silk over steel as she pushed the envelope toward me with one manicured finger. "Nothing personal." Beside her, Howard Thorne nodded, his expression a practiced neutral that betrayed nothing. My fiancé, Oliver, stared at his hands, refusing to meet my eyes. 2 days before the wedding? I managed to keep my voice steady despite the hurricane building inside me. "This is when you decide to bring this up. We've been meaning to discuss it for some time," Howard said, glancing at his Patek Philippe watch, a nervous habit I'd noticed over the 3 years I'd been dating his son. "The timing is unfortunate." Oliver finally looked up, his blue eyes pleading. "Liz, it's just paperwork. It doesn't change anything between us, but it did. It changed everything." I slowly reached for the envelope, feeling the weight of their expectations as I slid my finger beneath the flap. Inside was a 40-page document detailing, in dense legal language, exactly how little they thought I was worth. I'd met Oliver at a charity gala where I was working as an event coordinator. A classic story. He was the wealthy heir to the Thorne Financial Group. I was the girl from South Boston who'd worked her way through college. We fell in love despite our different backgrounds. Or so I thought. Now, sitting in their Beacon Hill mansion, surrounded by antiques worth more than my annual salary, I realized they had never seen me as an equal. To them, I would always be an outsider, a potential threat to their precious family fortune. I flipped through the pages, catching phrases like sole ownership and no claim to family assets, until I reached a particular clause that made my blood freeze. "If the marriage dissolves within 5 years," I read aloud, "Elizabeth Chen receives a one-time payment of $50,000 and forfeits all rights to any property acquired during the marriage." Margaret's chin lifted slightly. "It's generous considering." "Considering what?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Considering you're bringing nothing to the table." "Financially speaking," she replied, not unkindly, but with the casual cruelty of someone stating what they believed was an obvious fact. Little did they know. I closed the document and met Margaret's gaze directly. "I'll need to have my lawyer review this." Surprise flickered across her face. "Your lawyer?" "Yes," I said, standing up and tucking the envelope into my bag. "I'll get back to you tomorrow." As I walked toward the door, Oliver hurried after me. "Liz, wait! Let me explain." I turned to face the man I was supposed to marry in 48 hours. "Explain what exactly? That your parents think I'm a gold digger? That you didn't have the courage to warn me about this ambush?" "It's not like that," he insisted, lowering his voice. "It's just business. My parents have built something they want to protect. And what about what we're building?" I asked. "Does that need protection too?" He had no answer. I left without another word, walking out into the chilly October evening with my head held high. Only when I was safely in my car did I allow myself to breathe, to think, to plan. Because what the Thornes didn't know was that I had my own secret. One worth exactly $7 million, and it was about to change everything. The night air was crisp as I drove across the city to the only person who would understand. My grandmother. Machen, her modest apartment in Quincy, was a world away from the Thornes' Beacon Hill mansion, but it had always felt more like home than anywhere else. I found her in her small kitchen, hands deep in dough for the baozi she'd been making since I was a child. At 74, she still moved with precision born from decades of running her own restaurant. "Ah, Eliza," she said, her accent thickening her words. 2 days before wedding and you come to make dumplings instead? Bad sign." Her eyes narrowed as she took in my expression. "Very bad sign." I dropped my bag on a chair and washed my hands at the sink. Without a word, I began helping her fold the dumplings, a rhythm we'd perfected over years. "They gave me a prenup," I finally said, focusing on pleating the dough perfectly. "They think I'm after their money." Grandmother snorted. "Rich people always think everyone wants their money. As if money is the only thing worth having. $50,000, I continued. That's what they think I'm worth if the marriage ends within 5 years. And the boy? What does he say? I swallowed hard. He says it's just business, that it doesn't change anything between us. But it already has, she observed quietly. She was right. The moment that envelope hit the table, something had shifted. A crack had formed in the foundation of what I thought Oliver and I were building together. We worked in silence for a while, the familiar motions soothing my jangled nerves. Finally, grandmother wiped her hands on her apron and gestured for me to sit at the small kitchen table. "Time to talk about your grandfather's trust," she said. My grandfather, Chen Wei, had been a shrewd businessman who came to America with nothing but determination. He'd built a small empire of restaurants and real estate investments before his death 5 years ago. What few people knew was that he'd left most of his fortune in a trust that would mature on my 30th birthday, exactly 3 months ago. $7,423,618, grandmother said, reciting the exact figure from memory. "This is your inheritance. Not mine, not your parents'. Yours alone." I'd known about the trust since his death, but the full reality of it hadn't sunk in. $7 million. Far less than the Thorne fortune, certainly, but more than enough to ensure I would never need to depend on anyone else financially. I never told Oliver about it, I admitted. At first it didn't seem relevant. Then, the longer I waited, the harder it became to bring up. Grandmother nodded thoughtfully. "Your grandfather was wise to make this condition. He wanted you to find someone who loves you for yourself, not your money." And I thought I had, I said bitterly. She reached across the table and took my hand. Her palm was warm and slightly damp from the dough, comforting in its familiarity. "Now you have choice to make," she said. "What will you do?" I looked around at the small apartment, filled with memories of my grandfather's laughter, my grandmother's wisdom, and the values they'd instilled in me. Work hard, be honest. Know your worth. I'm going to call my lawyer tonight, I decided, and tomorrow I'm going to have a very interesting conversation with the Thornes. Grandmother smiled, the same smile that had comforted me through skinned knees and broken hearts. "Good girl. Remember what your grandfather always said." "The best revenge is living well," I finished for her. But as I drove back to my apartment that night, I wondered if living well would be enough. The humiliation of sitting at that table, being valued like a commodity, burned inside me. The pain of Oliver's betrayal, his silence, his compliance, cut deep. No, I decided as I pulled into my parking space. Living well might be the best revenge in general, but in this case, I wanted something more specific. That night, I barely slept. My mind raced through the past 3 years with Oliver, searching for signs I might have missed. Had our relationship always been conditional? Had he ever truly seen me as an equal, or was I just an exotic adventure before he eventually married someone from his own social circle? By morning, I had a plan. My first call was to Dennis Park, the lawyer who had handled my grandfather's estate. After explaining the situation, I asked him to meet me at his office in an hour. "Bring the prenup," he said. "And Eliza? I'm sorry this is happening." I showered and dressed carefully, choosing a simple but elegant navy blue dress that I'd bought with my own money. No designer labels, nothing that the Thornes had influenced. I needed to remember who I was. Dennis was waiting when I arrived, his office overlooking the Boston Harbor. He'd been my grandfather's friend for decades before becoming his lawyer, and he'd watched me grow up. "Let me see this insulting document," he said, reaching for the envelope I carried. As he read through the prenup, his expression darkened. $50,000 for 5 years of marriage? That's not even enough to rent an apartment in this city for a year. He flipped to another page. "And look at this. You waive all rights to any appreciation of assets brought into the marriage by Oliver, even if you contributed to that appreciation." He shook his head. "This isn't a prenuptial agreement. It's a contract for indentured servitude. Can they do this?" I asked. "Legally? Yes, morally?" He removed his glasses. I'd be ashamed to present this to anyone, let alone someone my son purported to love. I nodded, steeling myself for what came next. I want to counter. Dennis raised an eyebrow. With what terms? First, I want to reveal my inheritance. His eyes widened slightly. You never told Oliver? No. And now I understand why my grandfather insisted on keeping it quiet until I turned 30. Wise man, Dennis murmured. What else? I want to propose my own terms. One that protects me, but also... I hesitated, searching for the right words. I want to see what Oliver will do when the tables are turned. Dennis leaned back in his chair, considering. A test? Exactly. If he loves me for who I am, money shouldn't matter. Either my lack of it or my unexpected wealth. For the next 2 hours, Dennis and I drafted a counter-proposal. It was fair, equitable, and designed to protect both parties. Everything the Thorns version was not. But it had one key difference. It acknowledged my separate property of $7 million and required that Oliver waive all rights to it and any appreciation or income derived from it. This puts you on equal footing, Dennis said, reviewing our work. Now we'll see how they react when they're not holding all the cards. As I left his office with the new document, my phone buzzed with a text from Oliver. Please call me. We need to talk. I ignored it. Instead, I called Margaret Thorne directly. Elizabeth. She answered, her surprise evident. I wasn't expecting to hear from you so soon. I'd like to meet with you, Howard and Oliver, this afternoon to discuss the prenuptial agreement, I said, keeping my voice professional and detached. My lawyer has prepared a response. Your lawyer, she repeated, that same note of surprise coloring her voice. Well, I suppose we could meet at 3. Perfect. And Margaret? You might want to have your lawyer present as well. There was a pause. I'll make the arrangements. 3 hours later, I sat once again at the Thorns' mahogany table. This time, however, I was not caught off guard. This time I was ready. Oliver looked haggard, as if he hadn't slept either. Margaret and Howard maintained their composed facades, though I detected a new wariness in their eyes. Beside them sat a gray-haired man introduced as Jeffrey Blackwell, the Blackwell from their law firm's name. Elizabeth has prepared a response to our proposal, Margaret began. Nodding toward me, I placed my counter-proposal on the table. Before we discuss terms, there's something you should know. I looked directly at Oliver, something I should have told you earlier. All eyes were on me as I continued. 3 months ago, on my 30th birthday, I came into an inheritance from my grandfather. $7,423,618 to be exact. The silence that followed was deafening. Howard's mouth actually fell open. Margaret's perfect composure cracked as she looked from me to her husband in confusion. Oliver just stared. You're worth $7 million? He finally asked. No, I replied evenly. I'm worth far more than that as a person. But financially speaking, yes. That's what I bring to this marriage, which you might have known if anyone had bothered to ask instead of assuming. Jeffrey Blackwell recovered first, reaching for my counter-proposal. May I? I nodded, watching as he scanned the document. This is quite comprehensive, he acknowledged, and considerably more equitable than our initial offer. The difference, I said, is that I don't see marriage as a business transaction where one party needs to win at the expense of the other. Oliver stood abruptly. Can I speak with you privately, please? I followed him into the study, where he closed the door and turned to me with wounded eyes. Why didn't you tell me? He demanded. Why didn't you tell me about the prenup? I countered. He ran a hand through his hair. I was going to, but what? You were afraid I'd react exactly like this? That I'd question whether you actually trusted me? Whether you saw me as an equal partner? That's not fair, he protested. My parents... Stop. I held up a hand. Just stop. This isn't about your parents. This is about us. About the fact that you were willing to let me walk into that room yesterday completely unprepared to be ambushed. He had the grace to look ashamed. I'm sorry. I should have warned you? Yes, you should have. I moved toward the door, then paused. The new prenup is fair, Oliver. It protects both of us. If you can't sign it, if you can't accept me as an equal with my own assets to protect, then we shouldn't get married at all. I left him standing there and returned to the dining room, where Margaret was whispering urgently to Howard. I'll give you all some time to review the counter-proposal, I said, gathering my purse. But I should mention that the wedding is in less than 48 hours. So we'll need an answer by tomorrow morning. As I reached the door, Margaret called after me. Elizabeth, wait! I turned, one eyebrow raised in query. I may have misjudged the situation, she said carefully. Perhaps we can find a compromise that satisfies everyone. I looked at her, this woman who had been prepared to value my contribution to her son's life at $50,000, and smiled thinly. I'm not interested in compromise, Margaret. I'm interested in equality. The ball is in your court. As I drove away from their house for the second time in 2 days, I felt something I hadn't expected. Power. Not the fleeting power of wealth, but the enduring power of self-worth. Now I just had to decide if Oliver was still worth marrying at all. That evening, I sat on my balcony overlooking the Charles River, watching the lights of the city flicker to life as dusk fell. My phone had been buzzing nonstop with texts and calls from Oliver, but I needed space to think. The wedding was supposed to happen at the Thorns summer estate on Cape Cod, a lavish affair with 300 guests, many of whom had already arrived in town. Canceling would be a logistical nightmare and a public humiliation for both families. But going through with it without resolving this fundamental breach of trust seemed impossible. Knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. Through the peephole, I saw Oliver standing in the hallway, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. I hesitated, then opened the door. Can I come in? He asked. Please. I stepped aside wordlessly to let him pass. He entered and immediately began pacing my small living room. You've been ignoring my calls, he said. I've been thinking. He stopped pacing to look at me. About what? About calling off the wedding? Among other things, I admitted. Like whether you ever really saw me as your equal. Of course I did. I do, he insisted. I crossed my arms. Then why agree to that insulting prenup in the first place? He sank onto my couch, deflating. I didn't agree with it. I argued with them about it for weeks. But you still ambushed me with it 2 days before our wedding. I know. I was a coward. He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. I've been a coward my whole life when it comes to standing up to them. This vulnerability was new. In the 3 years we'd been together, Oliver had always presented a confident, sometimes even arrogant exterior, the self-assured heir to the Thorne fortune. Now, for the first time, I glimpsed the insecurity beneath. Tell me the truth, I said, sitting across from him. All of it. He took a deep breath. My parents have controlled everything my entire life. Where I went to school, what I studied, who I was allowed to be friends with. The only time I ever defied them was when I fell in love with you. This was news to me. I'd always assumed his parents' reservations about our relationship were recent, stemming from the engagement. They've been against us from the beginning? Not overtly. They're too sophisticated for that. But they made their expectations clear. He leaned forward. When I told them I was going to propose, they started talking about the prenup. I kept putting it off, hoping they'd drop it or at least soften the terms. But they didn't. No. Last week, my father threatened to cut me off completely if I didn't get you to sign. No access to the family business, no inheritance, nothing. I absorbed this, and you were afraid to lose it all. Not for the reasons you think, he said quickly. I don't care about the money for myself. But without my position at Thorne Financial, how would I support us? What would I even do? I've never worked anywhere else. The irony wasn't lost on me. So you were worried about not being able to provide for me, while simultaneously asking me to sign a document saying I had no right to what you provided. He winced. When you put it that way, it sounds terrible. It is terrible, Oliver. I know. I should have told you everything from the start. He ran his hands through his hair. After you left today, I had the biggest fight with my parents that I've ever had in my life. This piqued my interest. About what? About how they treated you. About how they've always treated me. About everything. He met my eyes directly. I told them I wouldn't sign their prenup, even if it meant being disinherited. That if they forced me to choose between their money and you, I'd choose you every time. I wanted to believe him, but after the events of the past 2 days, trust was in short supply. What did they say? My father said I was making the biggest mistake of my life. My mother, he hesitated, actually seemed impressed. She said it was the first time I'd ever stood up for anything. And now? Now I'm here asking if you'll still marry me on Saturday. He reached for my hands. With your prenup, or no prenup at all. Whatever you want. I studied his face, searching for any sign of deception. Why should I believe you? How do I know this isn't just another tactic? That you're not just saying what you think I want to hear? Because I brought proof. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a letter, handing it to me. It was a formal letter from Howard Thorne, stating that as of that afternoon, Oliver had been removed from his position as Vice President of Investments at Thorne Financial Group and would no longer have access to company resources or family funds until further notice. He actually did it, I murmured, scanning the document. He cut you off, Oliver nodded. Effective immediately. I don't even have a job anymore. The magnitude of what he'd done hit me. For all his privilege and advantages, Oliver had just sacrificed his entire way of life, everything he'd ever known, for me, or had he? A new suspicion formed in my mind. When exactly did you find out about my inheritance? He blinked, confused by the sudden change in topic. This afternoon, when you told everyone. And you had no idea before that? No hint at all. None. Why would I? I studied him carefully. Because it would be awfully convenient to get disowned by your parents right when you discover your fiancé has $7 million. Hurt flashed across his face, followed by understanding. You think I'm playing some kind of angle? That I'm choosing you now because you're rich too? It crossed my mind. He stood up, pacing again. If I were that calculating, wouldn't I have just signed your prenup and kept my job and my inheritance? Wouldn't that have been the smarter play? He shook his head. I'm not that clever, Liz. I'm just a man who finally found the courage to stand up for the woman he loves. I wanted to believe him. More than anything, I wanted to believe that the man I'd fallen in love with, the man I thought I knew, was real. What happens now? I asked quietly. If we get married, what will you do? Where will we live? He sat back down, closer this time. I don't know exactly. I have my personal savings, which isn't insignificant. I have my MBA. I can find another job, probably not in finance since my father will blackball me, but something. He took my hand. We can figure it out together. As equals. As equals, I repeated, testing the words. For 3 years, I'd been the one with less money, less social standing, less power in the relationship. Now suddenly the balance had shifted. I was the one with financial security, with leverage. It was a lot to process. I need some time to think, I said finally. The wedding is the day after tomorrow. I'll give you my answer tomorrow. He nodded, standing reluctantly. I understand. At the door he paused. Whatever you decide, I want you to know one thing. Loving you is the best decision I ever made. After he left, I sat in the growing darkness, weighing truth against lies, love against pride, future against past. At midnight, I made a call. The morning before my wedding dawned clear and cold, the October sun struggling to warm the crisp New England air. I'd barely slept, my mind too full of the decisions ahead. At 9 o'clock, I arrived at Dennis Park's office for our scheduled meeting with the Thornes. Oliver was already there, sitting stiffly in the waiting area. He stood when he saw me, hope and anxiety battling in his expression. Good morning, I said, formal but not cold. Morning, he replied. Have you decided? Let's get through this meeting first. The receptionist led us into the conference room where Dennis waited with Howard, Margaret, and Jeffrey Blackwell. The tension was palpable as we all took our seats around the polished table. Thank you all for coming, Dennis began. We're here to finalize the prenuptial agreement between Elizabeth Chen and Oliver Thorne prior to tomorrow's ceremony. I understand there have been some developments since our last discussion. Howard cleared his throat. Yes, Oliver has chosen to pursue this marriage without the support of Thorne Financial. While we disagree with his decision, we respect his right to make it. Margaret's lips were pressed into a thin line, but she nodded in agreement. In light of these changes, Dennis continued, the original prenuptial agreement is no longer relevant. Elizabeth has prepared an alternative. He slid copies of my counter-proposal across the table. Jeffrey Blackwell examined the document, then looked up in surprise. This is significantly more favorable to Oliver than I would have expected, given the circumstances. I'd spent hours the night before revising the agreement. The new version acknowledged my inheritance, but established a fair division of assets acquired during the marriage. It even included provisions for Oliver's future career support, not because he would need my money, but because I believed in his potential. I'm not interested in keeping score, I said. I'm interested in building a partnership. Howard studied me with new respect. Perhaps I misjudged you, Ms. Chen. Perhaps you did. I agreed evenly. Oliver was reading the document, his expression shifting from confusion to understanding to something that looked remarkably like love. I'll sign this, he said, looking up at me. Not because of what it says, but because of what it represents. Our commitment to each other, as equals. Jeffrey reviewed a few technical points with Dennis, and within an hour, both Oliver and I had signed the agreement. As the lawyers finalized the paperwork, Howard approached me. I owe you an apology, he said stiffly. My concerns about your intentions were misplaced. Yes, they were, I replied. But I understand wanting to protect your family. Even at the cost of my son's happiness? That's where you went wrong, I said. You can't protect someone by controlling them. He nodded slowly, considering this. A fair point. One I should have learned long ago. As we prepared to leave, Margaret pulled me aside. The wedding tomorrow, she said. Will it proceed as planned? I looked at Oliver, who was watching me with barely concealed anxiety. That depends on one more conversation, I told her. Oliver and I walked in silence from the law office to a small park nearby. The autumn leaves crunched beneath our feet as we found a bench overlooking the harbor. So, he said finally, are you going to marry me tomorrow? I turned to face him directly. Before I answer that, I need to know something. If I hadn't had that inheritance, if I really had been the penniless event coordinator your parents thought I was, would you still have stood up to them? He didn't answer immediately, which I appreciated. It meant he was actually considering the question rather than rushing to tell me what I wanted to hear. I want to say yes, he finally replied. I want to believe I would have found the courage sooner or later. But honestly, I don't know, he met my gaze. I've never been tested like that before. All my life, I've taken the easy path, the expected route. You were the first unexpected choice I ever made. And now I know what matters. Now I understand what my grandfather used to tell me before he died, that a man who doesn't stand for something will fall for anything. He took my hands. I'm not falling anymore, Liz. I'm standing. For us. I studied his face. This man I'd agreed to spend my life with. He'd made mistakes, serious ones, but he was also showing a capacity for growth I hadn't been sure he possessed. I still have concerns, I admitted. Trust, once broken, isn't easily repaired. I know, he said soberly. I'm not asking for your blind trust again. I'm asking for a chance to earn it back day by day. And your parents? Will always be my parents. But they no longer dictate my choices. He squeezed my hands. Whatever happens with them, whatever the future holds, I choose you. Not your money, which, by the way, is still shocking to me, but you. The woman who's strong enough to stand her ground and compassionate enough to offer second chances. The sincerity in his eyes was unmistakable. 3 years together had taught me his tells, the slight flush at the back of his neck when he was lying, the way his left eye twitched when he was hiding something. I saw none of those now. One last question, I said. What would you do if I said no? If I called off the wedding? He took a deep breath, his expression pained but resolute. I'd be devastated. But I'd respect your decision. I'd still find my own way professionally, still work on becoming the man I want to be rather than the one my parents designed. He managed a small smile. And maybe, someday, if you were willing, I'd ask for another chance to prove myself worthy of you. I believed him. Despite everything, I believed him. Yes, I said quietly. Yes? Yes, I'll marry you tomorrow. The relief and joy that washed over his face was worth all the doubt and pain of the past 2 days. But, I continued, on one condition. Anything. He promised. No more secrets between us. No more letting fear dictate our choices. From now on, we face everything together, as true partners. Deal, he said, sealing it with a kiss that felt like the first honest moment we'd shared in days. As we walked back toward the street, hand in hand, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. The deception, the revelation, the choice to forgive and move forward. You know, Oliver said, interrupting my thoughts, I still can't believe you've had $7 million this whole time, and you still made me pay for dinner. I laughed, the tension finally breaking. Get used to it. I didn't get rich by picking up the check. He smiled, the familiar warmth returning to his eyes. I can't wait to see what other surprises you have in store. Just remember, I said, squeezing his hand, in this partnership we're equals. Sometimes that means I'll be the one taking care of you. I'm counting on it, he replied. And for the first time since that prenup had landed on the table, I truly believed we might make it after all. The Thorne Summer Estate on Cape Cod was transformed for our October wedding. The sprawling lawn that stretched down to the private beach was dotted with heated clear tents, protecting guests from the cool autumn air while still showcasing the spectacular ocean view. Inside, thousands of fairy lights twinkled among arrangements of deep burgundy and burnt orange flowers, creating a warm glow against the approaching twilight. In the master suite of the guest house, I stood before a full-length mirror in my wedding gown, an elegant sheath of ivory silk with delicate beadwork that caught the light as I moved. My grandmother fussed with my veil, her weathered hands gentle as they adjusted the antique lace that had belonged to her mother. Beautiful, she pronounced with satisfaction. Your grandfather would be so proud. Of the dress or of standing up to the thorns? I asked with a smile. Both, she patted my cheek. But mostly of the woman you have become. Strong but not hard. Smart but still kind. There was a soft knock at the door, and to my surprise, Margaret Thorne entered. She looked elegant as always in a silver blue gown, though I noted a new hesitancy in her normally confident bearing. May I speak with Elizabeth alone for a moment? She asked my grandmother. May gave her an appraising look, then nodded. I will check on flowers. 5 minutes only. Bride needs peace before ceremony. When the door closed behind her, Margaret and I regarded each other in silence. Finally, she spoke. You look lovely, she said. Thank you. She moved further into the room, her fingers trailing over the jewelry laid out on the dressing table, the diamond earrings that had been her gift to me months ago. I came to give you this, she said, placing a small velvet box beside the earrings. It's been in the Thorne family for 4 generations. I opened the box to find an exquisite sapphire and diamond bracelet, the stones arranged in an intricate pattern that spoke of old-world craftsmanship. It's beautiful, I said honestly. It's traditionally worn by Thorne brides on their wedding day, she explained. I wore it when I married Howard. His mother wore it before me. I looked up at her, understanding the significance of the gesture. By offering this heirloom, she was acknowledging me as part of the family, something I hadn't been sure would happen after the events of the past few days. I'm not sure I've earned this, I said carefully. On the contrary. She met my eyes directly. You've earned it more than most. You fought for your place at the table, Elizabeth. You didn't just marry into wealth. You brought your own strength, your own value. Is that all that matters in your family? Wealth and power? She considered this, taking a seat on the upholstered bench at the foot of the bed. It's what has mattered for a very long time. When you come from money, old money as we do, you're taught to protect it above all else, to be suspicious of outsiders, to maintain the legacy at any cost. She sighed. It becomes a prison of your own making. This vulnerability from the normally impenetrable Margaret Thorne was unexpected. For the first time, I saw her not as Oliver's intimidating mother, but as a woman who had made choices, and perhaps regretted some of them. The way you stood up for yourself, she continued. The way you demanded equality rather than advantage. It was admirable, and it made me realize how rare that is in our world. She gestured toward the bracelet. I want you to wear this today, not just as a symbol of joining our family, but as a reminder that you've changed us for the better. I picked up the bracelet, feeling its weight, both physical and symbolic. Thank you. I'd be honored to wear it. She helped me fasten it around my wrist, its sapphires gleaming against my skin. I do have one request, I added. Yes? Reinstate Oliver at the company. Not for his sake or mine, but because he's brilliant at what he does. Don't punish the business to make a point. She studied me thoughtfully. You surprise me again. Most people in your position would enjoy seeing their adversaries make concessions. I'm not interested in winning battles, I said. I'm interested in building a future. And like it or not, that future includes the Thorne family. A smile touched her lips, small but genuine. I'll speak with Howard tonight. As she turned to leave, I called after her. Margaret, thank you for hosting the wedding here. It's beautiful. It's the least we could do, she replied, after nearly ruining it. When she was gone, I turned back to the mirror, examining my reflection. The woman who looked back at me was changed from the one who had walked into the Thornes' dining room 3 days ago. She was stronger, more certain of her worth. She had faced a test and emerged not just unbroken, but somehow more whole. A few minutes later, my father arrived to walk me down the aisle. David Chen, the quiet engineer who had worked 60-hour weeks to put me through college, looked uncomfortable but proud in his tuxedo. Ready? He asked, offering his arm. I smiled, taking one last look at myself, at the bracelet that symbolized acceptance into a world that had once rejected me, at the veil that connected me to my own heritage and history. I'm ready, I said. We walked together across the lawn to where 300 guests waited beneath the tents. The string quartet began playing as we approached. At the end of the aisle stood Oliver, handsome in his tuxedo, his eyes finding mine with a look of such pure joy that any lingering doubts I had melted away. This was right. We were right. As I reached him, he whispered, "You look incredible." "So do you," I whispered back, noting with amusement the surprise in his eyes when he spotted his family's bracelet on my wrist. The ceremony was everything a wedding should be, meaningful without being overwrought, personal without being self-indulgent. We exchanged the vows we had written ourselves, promises that now carried even more weight after the challenges we had already weathered. "I vow to stand beside you as an equal partner," Oliver said, his voice steady and sure. "To support your dreams as fervently as my own. To choose you every day above all else." "I vow to trust in our shared strength," I responded. "To build with you a life of purpose and integrity. To choose honesty over comfort, growth over complacency, and love over fear." When we were pronounced husband and wife, the applause that erupted seemed to shake the very ground beneath our feet. As we walked back down the aisle together, I caught sight of our families in the front row, Howard and Margaret on one side, my parents and grandmother on the other. Such different worlds, now connected through us. At the reception, after the toasts and the dinner and the first dance, I found myself standing at the edge of the dance floor, watching Oliver spin my grandmother around to her obvious delight. Howard Thorne appeared beside me, offering a glass of champagne. "Quite the unexpected alliance, isn't it?" he said, nodding toward the dancing pair. "The best ones usually are," I replied, accepting the champagne. He studied me over the rim of his glass. "Margaret tells me you asked her to reinstate Oliver at the company. It seemed like the right thing to do." Yes, well, about that. He shifted uncomfortably. I've been thinking. Oliver's position as VP of Investments was always somewhat ornamental, created specifically for him. He cleared his throat. The company actually has a genuine need for someone to head our new Asia-Pacific division. Someone who understands both cultures, who can build relationships across differences. Someone perhaps like you. I nearly choked on my champagne. Are you offering me a job, Howard? Merely floating a possibility. For the future, when you're ready. His eyes held a new respect as they met mine. You've proven yourself a formidable strategist. The company could benefit from that kind of thinking. Before I could respond, Oliver returned from his dance with my grandmother, slightly out of breath. She's tireless, he said with a grin. I think she wore me out. Howard clapped his son on the shoulder, an unusually affectionate gesture from the normally reserved man. Enjoy your honeymoon. When you return, we'll discuss your future at the firm. Both of you. As he walked away to join Margaret, Oliver turned to me in confusion. What was that about? Both of us? I smiled, sliding my arm through his. It seems your father might be offering me a job. You're kidding, he said, eyes wide. And what did you say? I didn't give him an answer. That's something we should decide together, don't you think? As partners? Oliver's face softened as he drew me closer. Partners, he agreed. I like the sound of that. Over his shoulder, I caught sight of my grandmother watching us with satisfaction, raising her glass in a private toast. I thought of my grandfather and the gift he had given me. Not just the money, but the self-respect that came with knowing my own value. What are you thinking? Oliver asked, noticing my momentary distraction. I'm thinking about worth, I replied. About how some things can be measured in dollars, but the most important things can't be quantified at all. He nodded, understanding. Like love, like trust. Exactly. I leaned in to kiss him, brief but full of promise. Now, husband, I believe you owe me a dance. As he led me to the dance floor, I felt the weight of the sapphire bracelet on my wrist, a reminder of the old world we came from. But as we moved together among the fairy lights and autumn flowers, surrounded by family and friends from all the different chapters of our lives, I knew we were creating something new, a partnership built on respect, honesty, and the kind of love that chooses each other, again and again, no matter what. By the way, Oliver murmured as we danced, I still can't believe you kept $7 million a secret for 3 years. I laughed, resting my head against his shoulder. Just think of all the other surprises we have to look forward to. As long as they're not delivered in legal envelopes 2 days before major life events. I can handle it, he replied with a smile, and as the night deepened around us, as our separate pasts merged into a shared future, I knew that what we had built together was worth far more than any number on a bank statement. It was priceless.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.